Have you ever been told you look younger than your age? Not once, but over and over again. By strangers, by old friends, even by people who've watched you weather storms, and still can't explain the softness on your face. And maybe you've wondered, why does my face not fully reveal all that I've been through? You've lost sleep. You've known heartbreak. You've carried stress, grief, and quiet battles no one ever saw. You're not on a strict diet. You don't have magical genetics. And yet, there's something in you that time hasn't touched. I once met a woman in her mid-50s at a quiet cafe. No heavy makeup, no flashy clothes, but there was something about the way she sat, the way her eyes rested gently on the world that made her look luminous. I asked her, "What's your secret?" She smiled slowly and said, "I stopped living a life that didn't belong to me. And since then, I haven't felt so tired inside." Maybe when the soul stops being exhausted, the face stops aging too. That conversation stayed with me. It made me wonder, what if we don't age because of time, but because of the energy we lose from living disconnected from our soul? Carl Jung once said, "Age merely wrinkles the skin, but the loss of enthusiasm wrinkles the soul." It's not time that wearies us. It's the slow leaking of spiritual energy, the quiet, invisible current that holds the soul upright. Have you felt that in yourself? Some part of you, still intact, still glowing beneath the wear and tear of everyday life. Maybe that's not an accident. Maybe it's the spiritual energy within you, still flowing, still alive, still protecting something sacred from within. And maybe the real reason you still look younger than your age has nothing to do with collagen creams or diet. Maybe you've never fully disconnected from your soul. If something in this opened a quiet truth inside you, go ahead and subscribe, not because you need more answers, but because something in you remembers. You're not here by chance. You're here because some part of you is still holding on to the light. In the next part, we'll explore a deeper question. What exactly is spiritual energy? And what secret did Carl Jung discover about its power to preserve the soul and the face? What if your face is quietly telling the story of your soul's vitality? Not your skincare routine, not your diet, not even your age, but something deeper, something invisible, that either flows through you or doesn't. Carl Jung spoke often of something he called libido, but he didn't mean it the way most people think. To Jung, libido wasn't just sexual energy, it was spiritual energy, the raw psychic force that fuels everything meaningful in a person's life. Love, creativity, purpose, resilience, and healing. When this energy flows freely, a person doesn't just look alive, they are light. You've seen it before, in someone who isn't conventionally beautiful, but who lights up a room without trying. They don't speak loudly, they don't beg for attention, but something about their presence calms you, as if your nervous system recognizes them as safe. Jung believed that people who retain this spiritual energy are the ones who refuse to betray their soul. They may have suffered, they may have fallen apart, but somehow through it all, they stayed connected to their deeper self. You don't stay youthful by avoiding pain. You stay youthful by walking through it, without abandoning who you are. But in modern life, we leak our energy everywhere. We react to noise that doesn't matter. We smile when we're silently screaming inside. We stay in rooms where our truth is unwelcome. And every time we do, a piece of that spiritual current, the very thing keeping us alive, drains quietly from our face. There's a study that once said, people begin to visibly age when they lose their sense of meaning. Jung put it differently. He believed we can't live a fulfilled life if our psychic energy is trapped in rejected parts of the self. When the energy of life is repressed, the soul begins to rot, and the face follows. If any of this is landing deeply in your body, if it feels like a truth you never had words for, I invite you to leave a comment. Even just "I feel this." Because sometimes all it takes is knowing you're not the only one. Let me tell you a story. I once knew a man in his 60s, gray hair, time-worn skin. By all measures, he should have looked old. But his eyes, They smiled even when his lips didn't. There was something in him that refused to dim. He'd lost everything at one point: his career, his marriage, his sense of direction. And yet one day he paused, not to start over, but to ask, what part of me is still alive, even though everything I once built has fallen apart? From that moment, he began to live differently, slower, quieter, but truer. People said he looked younger, not because of his skin, but because something had returned to his gaze. And that made me believe. Spiritual energy isn't just a concept, it's a life force, a kind of inner electricity that flows back into us the moment we stop trying to become someone we're not. In the next part, we'll ask a more uncomfortable question. Why do most people age faster than they should and never realize what's draining their soul? Have you ever looked at someone in their 30s and seen the eyes of a soul that's lived 100 years? It's not physical exhaustion. It's not lack of sleep. It's something deeper, something you can't name, but you can feel. And maybe that's the moment when their spiritual energy began to withdraw. Carl Jung once observed something unsettling. Many people begin to age prematurely, not because of time, but because something inside them quietly stopped moving. Not the heart, not the body, but the soul's current, the invisible spiritual energy that keeps a person lit from within. You don't have to suffer a great tragedy to become depleted. Sometimes all it takes is one quiet habit repeated over and over, living in a way that denies who you truly are. You smile when your heart is silent. You stay quiet when your truth wants to speak. You become agreeable, likable, polite, while something sacred inside you folds in on itself. You perform. You adapt. You become functional. And one day you look in the mirror and something in your reflection feels dim. Jung called this the split between the persona and the self. The persona is the mask, the part of you that performs. But when it takes over and the true self is buried beneath layers of performance, the soul begins to freeze. Spiritual energy stops flowing, and the body begins to carry the burden of that disconnection. You think you're surviving, doing what's necessary, being responsible. But behind the scenes, your spiritual energy is leaking drop by drop through every unspoken no, every forced smile, every moment you abandon what you really feel. People don't age because of years. They age because of how often they betray themselves. Think back to when you were young, not in age, but in essence. You still trusted your instincts. You still let yourself feel. You still moved with honesty even when it was messy. And then somewhere along the way, you chose silence over conflict, safety over truth, familiarity over aliveness. And that glow quietly faded. Jung believed that spiritual energy begins to deteriorate the moment you stop moving in alignment with the soul, not because you grew older, but because you stopped growing real. You no longer believe in the words you speak. You wake up in the morning not with purpose, but with a practiced routine that feels like someone else's life. The world may not notice the change, but your body does. Your face does. Your voice carries it. Your eyes reflect it. No serum can undo what your spirit has been quietly surrendering. And the most terrifying part, you get so good at pretending that you forget you're pretending. Until one day, you're surrounded by people laughing at all the right moments and still feel like you're watching your own life from behind glass. The aging doesn't start in the skin. It starts in the soul that hasn't spoken in years. So let me ask you something. Is there a part of you that's still alive but has been waiting for permission to return? Have you ever noticed your face aging not over years, but after just a few months of holding in too much pain, not from stress, not from lack of sleep, but from carrying a soul that's been bracing for impact too long? Carl Jung believed that the wounds we don't face don't disappear. They become shadows, buried emotions, hidden parts of the psyche, stored quietly in the unconscious. And these shadows, they feed on your spiritual energy, not loudly, but slowly, like a soft leak in the foundation of your being. You may have learned to smile after betrayal, to stay quiet for the sake of peace, to appear composed while your inner world fell apart. And the world applauds that. They call it strength. But your face tells a different story. There's a look that no amount of makeup can hide. It lives in the eyes, a certain stillness that once held back too many tears. We aren't taught how to feel. We're taught how to suppress. But spiritual energy doesn't lie. It either flows through you freely, or it's buried beneath all the pain you never gave yourself permission to feel. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And silently it will shape your face too. The mouth that never said what it needed. The forehead that held too many worries in silence. The eyes that stopped lighting up, somewhere along the way." You can't hold on to youth if every day you're suppressing parts of your truth. No one stays radiant in a body full of unshed grief. No one glows when they've spent years pretending to be fine. Sure, there are wounds that don't leave visible scars, only a subtle hardness in how you carry yourself. And from that place, your light begins to dim. Not because you've given up, but because you've forgotten what it feels like to be whole. Some people reach 40 and already wear the expression of someone twice their age. Not because time is cruel, but because their inner world has gone unseen, unheard, unfelt for far too long. A childhood marked by emotional neglect, a love never properly mourned, 1,000 tiny heartbreaks, with no witness. These don't go away. They settle into the tissues, the breath, the gaze. And over time, they age you. You can't protect your spiritual energy if you've never dared to face the pain that's been quietly living inside you. Jung compared the human soul to a vessel, and if that vessel is filled with unfelt, unprocessed emotions, there's no room left for light to enter, no space for wonder, no room for joy, no air for the soul to breathe. And with every repressed emotion, your radiance, your presence, your youthfulness contracts. You might say, "But I don't feel broken. I function just fine." But pause. What part of you stopped speaking so long ago that you forgot it even had a voice? What if the face you see in the mirror tomorrow has less to do with time and more to do with how honest you're willing to be today? Spiritual energy can be drained by pain, but it can also be restored by truth. Not surface-level truth, not saying I'm fine when you're not, but the kind of truth that shakes the soul back to life, the kind that reunites you with yourself. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the inner return to who you were before the world told you who to be. You don't become radiant by performing. You become radiant by remembering the part of you that was buried to survive, the part of you that never stopped hoping someone would ask, "What do you truly need?" Sometimes that shift begins in silence, a single quiet moment when you stop running from yourself. You turn off the noise. You put your hand on your chest. You ask, "Is the life I'm living feeding me or quietly starving me?" And the moment you answer that question, honestly, something opens. The soul moves. The breath deepens. The body softens. And light begins to return to the face. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is not positive thinking. This is what happens when you stop performing for the world and start living from your soul. Radiance is the result of alignment. When the inside finally matches the outside, when the smile is real, when the eyes don't lie. That's when people say, "You look different, softer, brighter, you seem younger." But they don't know what they're seeing is not better skin or more sleep. They're seeing your energy return. And yes, it's possible at any age. You can be 60 and look younger than someone who's 30 because you've stopped leaking your energy into things that no longer serve your spirit. If this touched something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment. Even just, "I'm coming back to myself." And if you'd like to stay connected to this kind of work, subscribe to the channel. Not because you need more information, but because your soul might need more reminders that it's still allowed to feel alive. So let me ask you something. If you stopped trying to hold it all together, what part of you would finally breathe again? It's not enough to reconnect with your soul. You have to learn how to protect it from everything that once made it dim. Spiritual energy is not infinite. It's sacred. And like any sacred fire, it burns bright only when shielded from what drains it without mercy. Carl Jung believed that psychic energy must be contained, not spilled endlessly into people roles or identities that pull you away from your center. So what protects this energy? Stillness, solitude, soul boundaries, not walls, not avoidance, but a quiet clarity. I do not give away pieces of myself to what no longer feeds me. You lose spiritual energy every time you enter a room and abandon your intuition to keep the peace. You lose it when you stay in conversations that leave you feeling emptied, not because you spoke too much, but because you weren't allowed to speak your truth. You lose it when you allow your presence to be consumed by noise that has nothing to do with your path. And when this goes on for too long, you don't just feel tired. You start looking like someone who no longer lives close to their source. The eyes dull, the body tightens, the voice shrinks. It's not aging, it's misalignment. The soul was not made for constant accessibility. It was made to expand inward, to return to still places, to silence, to undivided attention, to breath that doesn't perform, to moments that don't require applause. Jung understood that individuation required this kind of containment, a gathering of energy back into the self after a lifetime of scattering it into roles. Because until you become selective with your energy, you remain vulnerable to anything loud enough to convince you it's urgent. And most of what is urgent is not sacred. There's something ancient that begins to reawaken when you stop offering yourself to noise. You walk into a room and carry your own calm. Your nervous system stays regulated because you've stopped trying to mirror everyone else's. Your eyes soften, your body breathes, and your face, even with age, returns to a kind of quiet glow. There is a deeper kind of youth that has nothing to do with what you chase, but with what you've stopped surrendering your essence to. The body may wrinkle, the hair may gray, but when the soul is alive, the eyes keep shining. The secret to staying young was never locked in a product, a diet, a routine. It was always hidden in your relationship to something quiet and eternal inside you, that place in you that doesn't need to prove or earn or chase, but only to return. Radiance is not something you apply. It's something you release when you're no longer betraying who you are. It's in the breath that finally slows down, the truth you no longer withhold, the sadness you finally honor, the joy you stop apologizing for. You stay young when you stop leaking energy into people who don't listen, into roles that don't reflect your truth, into versions of yourself that were never yours to begin with. You stay young when you choose peace over performance, silence over overstimulation, presence over pleasing. Carl Jung didn't offer formulas. He offered paths, archetypes, symbols, and the wisdom that what we seek is not out there, but always a remembering. You don't need to become radiant. You only need to stop covering up the radiance that's already there. If this journey moved something in you, don't let it disappear in the noise. Subscribe to this channel if you'd like to stay close to this kind of depth. Leave a comment, even one word, to mark your presence here. And if you know someone whose light has dimmed, share this with them, because sometimes what keeps us young isn't youth itself, but being witnessed by those who remember how to see. You don't grow old, you forget how to glow. Anonymous. So maybe today is not about trying harder. Maybe it's about stopping just long enough to feel your soul is still here, and it still wants to shine.